Hello, students. Welcome to English 250, Introduction to the Short Story, Week 7. Today we shall speak about Toni Morrison's short story entitled Recitatif, with reference to character. Toni Morrison is an African-American writer whose focus is a poetic rendering of the life of her people. But in Recitatif, she does something fascinating. It is a story of racial tension, prejudices, but also envisages harmonious, or more or less harmonious, coexistence without tension, at least without hatred. The main characters in this story are black and white, yet we do not know who is what. We are told that standing beside each other, the two girls are like salt and pepper, quote unquote. Both little girls, that is Roberta and Twyla, report their parents' prejudices of each other, but the children themselves have no use for these prejudices, at least when they're young, and some kind of genuine friendship tends to flourish. Let me just quote from the book, page 10, first page, when the two little girls are brought together, are informed at the orphanage that they are to occupy the same room. Now, this is Twyla is the narrator. The minute I walked in and the big bozo is the boss of the orphanage, introduced us, I got sick to my stomach. It was one thing to be taken out of your own bed early in the morning. It was something else to be stuck in a strange place with a girl from a whole other race. And Mary, that's my mother, she was right. Every now and then she would stop dancing long enough to tell me something important. And one of the things she said was that they never washed their hair and they smelled funny. Roberta sure did. Smell funny, I mean. Unquote. End quote. Note that at no stage does it say here that Mary or Roberta is white or black. Rather, Mary and her daughter Twyla display a common prejudiced perception that the other, whoever they are, smells funny and doesn't wash. This becomes the pattern of the story. Now, you of course will be familiar with this notion that one race or ethnic group smells funny and doesn't wash is it's almost universal. If one group has a prejudice against another group, it seems that it will always involve something about these very basic physical characteristics and physical habits. But the fact that both sides accuse each other of having these characteristics is enough to let us know that we're not dealing here with a fact, we're dealing with a prejudice. Further on, when the mothers of the two girls meet, racial prejudice prevents them from having any contact with each other at all. Roberta's mother simply refuses to shake hands with Mary. All of this without identifying either one as black or white. The symbolism is interesting too. Roberta's mother wears a big Christian cross around her neck and carries a Bible. Mary, by contrast, lives a life of pleasure and wears revealing clothes, even if they're not that fashionable. But who is whom? Is the Bible-carrying mother who wears the cross Euro-American or Anglo-American? What is the racial identity of the casually living Mary with her modern clothing? It's not clear. To argue one way or the other is simply to plunge into a set of racial stereotypes. By the way, there's also another argument, and that is that it's not so much race that prejudices Roberta's mother against Mary. It could well be that one is a devout, religious woman, carries her Bible everywhere with her, and she's not entirely happy to meet a young woman like Mary, who obviously lives a different kind of life and has different priorities that might not go well, go with the kinds of ethics that Roberta might think everybody should share. Further on in the story, the two girls meet in a place called Howard Johnson's, where Twyla works. Howard Johnson's is some kind of fast food restaurant. Twyla is working while Roberta is living much more freely. In fact, traveling at the stage to a Jimi Hendrix concert. Now, Twyla is living and working in what sounds like a white working class neighborhood, or she's living a white working class life. The fact that Roberta is going to a concert given by one of the most prominent black rock musicians of the 1960s suggests that she herself might be African American. Now, the thing is, this is a rather strange fact, but it's much more likely that a young person going to a Jimi Hendrix concert would, in fact, be white. It's a strange thing during the 1960s and 70s in the United States. Many of the really great black American musicians, blues musicians plus musicians like Jimi Hendrix, tended to have more numerous white following than a black following. I mean, what the reasons for this, of course, another thing. Let me just say something about Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was a black rock guitarist. He more or less invented, the accepted way of, the now accepted way of playing rock music on an electric guitar. He's considered something of a musical genius. In fact, he was an extraordinary musician. Yeah. Okay, and so on. Likewise, going back to Twyla in her working class suburb, working class doesn't necessarily mean white. It can also mean black, of course, and any other ethnicity or racial group. Likewise, towards the end of the story, that is pages 17 to 19, the two women meet on opposing sides in a political protest. The protest is about integrating schools, that is, sending black kids to schools that are predominantly white, and vice versa. Roberta opposes this integration. Twyla opposes those who oppose it. We're not really sure what she believes in this respect. But even at this stage, it's not possible to identify the race identity of the two women according to the political positions they take out. The way the story is written, the two women speak only of the problems of their respective children having to take a bus to a distant school instead of being allowed to attend their own local schools. The story talks of an encounter of two opposing political positions on the streets with Roberta and Twyla key players in this protest. But it never says precisely, it never gives the details of this project to integrate schools in the United States that took place during the 1960s. Rather, what it does is highlight the concerns that each individual woman has. And also it highlights a growing animosity or oppositional feeling, if you like, between the two women. Twyla's upset that Roberta treated her in the way she did in the Howard Johnson restaurant. She feels that Roberta is acting superior, and Roberta seems to have it seems to upset her that Twyla is not really living up to her potential in life and is happy to live a very ordinary life. Sometimes people get upset about this. Now, regarding Maggie, it seems that this is continuing to talk about the racial identity of Twyla and Roberta. It seems that Twyla hadn't noticed that Maggie was a black woman, insisting rather that she was, quote unquote, sandy-colored. This is a classic position attributed to white Americans, especially liberals, namely that they try to solve the race problem by refusing to notice the color of a person. Yet still, it is a position that does not necessarily identify its holder's race. By the end of the story, we know that both women hold prejudices. Some they're aware of, some not. We know that both of them are, as adults, unclear about certain key events in childhood, especially while they're at the orphanage. This is normal. To use Richard Carney's words, the force of a narrative sometimes works to obscure or ignore actual facts or events that don't fit well into the story. And of course, this is it's basic human psychology, that facts and memories that are somehow inconvenient to us at one time or another tend to get pushed away, and we tend to replace them with a nice story. And we do not know the racial identity of the two women. What we do know about is their difference. It is a difference that cannot be hidden. It's a difference that is not desirable to be hidden. And it is for Toni Morrison, the author, difference that is important rather than identity. So it's not so much the identity of a person that's important, the identity of this person, the identity of that person. It's the fact that they have some kind of difference, and that difference can be a racial difference, ethnic difference, linguistic difference, sexual difference, gender difference, and so on. So difference then becomes the key component in the key narrative component, the key component of character in Toni Morrison's novel, even though identity, of course, is always related to difference, but she gives priority to difference rather than identity. Now, Maggie. The thing about Maggie is that she's absent from the story in a way. She's the very center of the story. We see this at the end, yet somehow she's absent. Okay? Somehow Maggie is pure difference. She seems not to have an identity. She seems not to be this or that. She operates as a principle of difference that runs through the story. And the violence of the story is directed towards difference. This perhaps is what we might call the moral of the story. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I look forward to reading your analyses.